The Marinade.
There's no O in Marinade. Let's try it one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
The Marinade.
Marinade.
Bone marinade.
That's
The Marinade.
The Marinade. With Jason and Earle.
Well, I was passing by a pawn shop over in the older part of town when something caught my eye and I stopped and turned around and I went inside and there I spied in the middle of it all this beat-up old guitar hanging on the wall. What do you
Welcome to The Marinade with Jason, Earle, a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. This is episode 45, and our guest for the second time is Verlon Thompson. Verlon is a legendary singer and songwriter originally from Oklahoma, who now makes his home in Nashville. Verlon spent many years writing songs for some of the biggest names in country music before joining forces with the legendary Guy Clark as Guy's songwriting partner and guitarist. Verlon's written for the likes of Randy Travis, Kenny Rogers, Sam Bush, Trisha Yearwood, Jimmy Buffett, Alan Jackson, many more have cut Verlon songs. And in addition to that, he spent a really long time with Guy Clark. And we cover both of those facets of his life and times in his life during this conversation. The first time we caught up was way back in 2016 at the Skipper Smokehouse in Tampa, Florida. That conversation went really deep and personal, and this one picked up right where we left off. You can find all things Verlon at verlonthompson.com. Verlon and I sat down at Spirit of the Suwannee Music Park during Suwannee Roots Revival this past October. Everyone, it is my distinct honor to present my conversation with the legendary Verlon Thompson.
I never missed a lick. It was like that guitar played itself and there was nothing I could do. And it was getting hard to tell just who was playing who. When I finally finished, I was almost out of breath. And my hands were shaking and my shirt was soaking wet. And that old man jumped up and grinned and he said, "Where in the hell you been?" He said, "I've been waiting all these years for you to stumble in." And then he grabbed an old beat up case and he said, "Go on, pack it up." He said, "You don't owe me nothing." Yep, when he said good luck, there was something spooky in his voice and a strange look on his face. And when I closed the lid, I saw my name was on that case.
Verlon, thank you for doing this again. This is such an honor. We had so much fun last time.
Yeah,
New
man.
Year's Eve 2016.
Yeah.
We were-
Hopefully we won't get locked in and have to break the law this time around.
If you're, folks who are new to the show, Verlon and I talked in 2016 at Skipper Smokehouse
Yeah.
when he played with Donna the Buffalo, and they locked us in to the venue, and we couldn't find a way out. So Verlon, like in an old cowboy movie, with his guitar on his back, kicked the back door open, and we sauntered off into the sunset.
Said our goodbyes and rode off into the sunset.
Such a fond memory. And that time you and I talked a lot about sort of your process, and we went pretty deep on a lot of things. And we didn't go as deep on your time with Guy, and that's one of the things that you talk so much about, but I kind of was hoping we could go a little bit into during this talk. And I watched a video the other day where you were it's from a few years ago, where you kind of told the story of how you guys got together in the first place. Were you playing with Loretta Lynn at that time?
I was writing for Loretta's publishing company.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my first. When I got to Nashville, I stumbled into to Loretta Lynn's Coal Miners Music, and she hired me as a staff songwriter.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I wrote for her for a year, and then it turned out, basically she was recording all of her own music, so she didn't really need a staff. I was basically a tax write-off.
Oh, okay.
And once I figured that out, I went on down the street to CBS Songs, another publishing company, and the guy was a staff writer there, and I signed on there, and that's where we first met.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the publishing? Those kinds of deals are like being a staff songwriter is just an interesting concept to me. Were you showing up like lunch pail in hand, basically writing all day?
Yeah, it was a job. I had a little room, and I would go in there at 10 o'clock every day, or sometimes earlier, and work till 5 o'clock and go home, and sometimes writing by myself, sometimes with other people, and it was. Yeah, I mean, you have a quota.
That's wild.
You have to write so many songs a year, and then basically what you're doing, it's kind of like a book advance. You get an advance from the publishing company to live on, and then when your songs get recorded, they take their money back out of your royalties until they're paid up, and then you start getting money if there's.
Wow.
Yeah. So. I did that for 20 years. I was able to stay above the red line for 20 years. In other words, I stayed ahead of my advance. And at about 20 years, I renegotiated the whole thing and then became a co-publisher with the big company, So then I retained even more of my own royalties, and
okay,
it's kind of like being a doctor in a group, and then you get invited to be a part of the group,
partner or whatever
that works. But yeah, it's crazy. It's kind of stressful because you if you're not getting enough songs recorded, and the royalties aren't covering your advance, then they look at the bottom line and you're gone.
Yeah.
And what saved me is I was not one of those guys that had a lot of big super hits.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you have one or two hits, that can cover you for several years.
Right.
But I was one of those guys. I got a lot of songs recorded, but a lot of them were album cuts that never made it to the radio. But I had so many of those that I was covering the nut every time,
Yeah.
and so I made it work.
Would you think of us? Is that just you're cranking out the songs, or are you thinking of a particular artist that might cut that song when you're writing in that environment?
Everybody does it differently, but I always just tried to write the best song I could write, as if I were going to perform it,
Yeah.
And the ones that I did occasionally try to customize it towards someone, for a certain act. It just never seemed believable. I never felt like that worked for me. So I just quit trying that, and I just kept writing the best song I could write. And I kind of learned that from Guy, And it really helped me. I think had I continued trying to write for the radio, I think I'd have been out of business and probably went back home to Oklahoma.
That makes a lot of sense. The craft is what you should be focused on, right? Doing the best work that you can do, rather than trying to fit it into somebody else's box or whatever. You're writing a song you're proud of. You're doing work you're proud of, and then that's going to resonate with people because it's going to come across as true, which is such a through line in your songs.
Yeah, and like Guy said, and I'm paraphrasing, but he told me, because when I first started doing it, I thought, oh my gosh, man, these songs are too personal. They're about people I know and things. And guy said, there's no such thing as too personal. He said, we're all living the same life. We're all just getting to these different checkpoints at different times. And he said, it doesn't matter. Write that song about whatever's happening to you. If this person doesn't get it today, in a couple of years, he'll hit that checkpoint where you were, and he'll go, oh, man, that's what that song is all about. And it just made it clear to me at that point. Awesome. It's like, okay, we're all living the same life, and the more personal, the better, because we're all going through the same stuff.
I was just yesterday talking about the idea of certain classics, whether it be song or fiction, or even films, certain classics that like I wasn't ready for when I first consumed them, and then when I consumed them later, and I had different life experiences, that connection point that you're able to make with a particular work later because you've gone through either that thing or something similar.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. You hit that checkpoint or one that's a whole lot like it, enough for you, that you understand what it was all about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so simple, but but we miss it. You miss it.
Yeah. Why do we miss it?
Because we're trying too hard. We think as a songwriter, you want every one of your songs to cover all the bases, the emotions and the struggles and the drama, and and therefore you start trying too hard. You try to put too much into it.
Yeah.
And really, what reveals the drama and the struggles and the emotion is usually what you don't say. It's usually the holes that you leave that allows people to sit back and take a breath and think about it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you let them, you just make a sketch and let them fill in the colors, which is so hard to do, to hold back as a writer. You want to make it colorful and flowery and exciting, but a lot of times it's that silence. It's that opportunity for the listener to go to their own place and fill in the blanks.
Right. I think so much of that, I think sometimes as a writer, and I'm not speaking for you here at all, I'm just speaking for my own process, is that I think ego gets involved sometimes, where I'm like, I can say this perfectly.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. And if I'm not there, then I'm going to keep working on it until it's perfect, rather than trusting your audience a little more.
Yeah, you got to give your audience credit. They're smarter than you think.
Right. And oftentimes smarter than you, and so it's like, I think about that with this show a lot. Like, we have such a sophisticated listener base, and sometimes I'll say something and then somebody will comment on it and they'll say something way more interesting than what I said.
Yeah. Well,
and that's great though. That's a beautiful thing. I'm totally okay with that.
It's wonderful.
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
I mean, it's you elicited the conversation, the thought that got it going.
Yeah. Like Tupac Shakur said something to the effect of, like, I may not change the world, but I'll spark the mind that does, right? Something like that. It's pretty sharp.
That. Yeah.
Are you conscious of making sure that you have those holes for them to fill? Like, as you're writing, do you back yourself off?
I think after all these years, I kind of do instinctively now, because it's just been a thing that I've thought about and worked on for so long. I don't, I just kind of feel it. I get to a point and I just feel, there shouldn't be anything. There doesn't have to be noise here.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It's still trial and error every day. It's still, I don't have it figured out.
That's exciting.
Yeah,
You've been doing this a long time. That's
no,
really
it's
exciting.
beautiful, and I teach a lot of writing classes now, and that's still exciting too, because as I teach, and I'm sure you probably know this, but I learn
Yep.
probably more than I'm teaching.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and because you're deconstructing that process for somebody to make it to make it accessible for them, and deconstructing a process is really getting to the heart of what makes it tick.
Yeah.
And that's hard,
Yeah, I do a little at the end of our songwriting course. I do a presentation afternoon on presentation. I say, now you've written the best song you think you can write. Now, how you going to present it? And I take 2 or 3 of my songs and I break it down to every single breath. I say, watch my index finger when I play this chord. Notice how I strummed downwards instead of upwards on that stroke. That's on purpose. I thought through this because it gives more of a ringing sound. And notice this pause right here. Notice how I break time for just a split second. That's to add a little anticipation. And I break it down to every note, every breath, every pause, not to mention the words. It's more about the performance.
Yeah.
And I stress that this, why would you paint a beautiful picture and put it in a shitty frame? You painted this beautiful picture, now give it the best, most thoughtful presentation you can.
Right.
And it changes a mediocre song into a wonderful song, and a wonderful song into a grand, fantastic song.
Have you learned that just over time, or have you learned that by watching and playing with Guy and other amazing artists over time, or is it a combination of?
It's a combination.
Yeah.
Just doing it, for 50 years.
Yeah.
A lot of it has happened by accident. A lot of it is I watch people and I really pay attention, and I try to, make mental notes and like, oh yeah, man, that would work so well if I did that at this point. And yeah, I mean, even like this morning, I was in the middle of one of my songs and I just stopped and explained something to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's a song doesn't have to be just like, okay, we start here and we play all these notes and then we hit the last one and that's it.
Yeah.
If something happens in the middle of the song that you feel like taking a breath and explaining, for me, it's a conversation. It's a conversation. It's not just a song.
So was that not a planned moment? That was an inspired moment, or?
No, no. It just occurred to me. I was playing a song about my mom and her mandolin, and there's a line in there that says it's about the hobos that used to come to their house, and they would leave this secret mark on the gate for the other hobos that followed, and it meant stop a while and visit. They'll feed you beans and biscuits. They'll pick some boiling cabbage and down yonder while you wait. Now, when I sang that line, I stopped and I said, I want to explain to you guys what boiling cabbage and down yonder is.
Mm-hmm.
That's 2 songs. It's 2 old-timey songs. One's called Boiling Cabbage. Boiling cabbage down, down, boiling cabbage down, boys. Boil it cabbage down, down, boil that cabbage down. It's an old-timey song. And Down Yonder is another old instrumental tune. So I just thought of it, and I thought this audience would love to know exactly what I'm. And then I played a little bit of both of those songs, and then went right back into my mom's song.
Oh, God, Gosh, I hate that I missed that set this morning. Damn it.
So it was like it was a little brief lesson in just a conversation.
You are good at that too. Like in the series Barnegie Hall that you and your wife Demetria put together out at your place, right? And you had these songwriters come in, and you guys talked process, and you talked about different songs, and then you had a little segment in there where you teach a little guitar lick. And I really enjoyed that as someone who's a very rudimentary guitar player and trying to get better. It was really helpful for me to hear your process.
Wow. I'm glad to hear you say that, because I lobbied her to take those little pieces out of the show because I thought it was too, I thought it interrupted everything else. But you're not the first.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of people, because what I call it, tricks of the trade, I believe, or something. But
yeah, that is what you call it.
It was the most basic things that a lot of people pass over, like what kind of pick should I be using? What size? What thickness? How should I hold it? How should I tune my guitar? What guitar should I play? Does this fit me, or does it fit the song? I mean, just so many. There's so many little things that
make a big difference.
They can, and they can also, as a songwriter, it can open up your creative flow a little bit. Just finding one new little trick fires you up and makes you want to create something so you can use that trick.
Yeah, I thought it was really helpful. I mean, like,
thanks.
Yeah, but I think the other thing that it lended to the show was a window. You are talking process with these songwriters in the show Barnegie Hall.
Yeah.
But you're also that little bit about, you're a songwriter, but you're also a hell of a guitar player. And so that little bit about like what you're thinking about when you're playing guitar, and the choices that you make for a creative and for someone, especially for a songwriter or a guitar player, that was super helpful to connect those two disciplines of yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, for me, it's all, people ask me, what comes first, the words or the music, or for me, there's no first or second. It's all one thing.
That's amazing.
It's words and music, and the way you play it, and the way you sing it, and the way you feel it, and the whole presentation. It's one thing in the end. When you stand up there in front of a group of folks, and you may have some killer lyrics, but if you just slop your way through them, and people aren't going to get it.
Yeah.
I mean, and you got some people are better than others, but even if like, I've heard people say, "Man, I can't stand to hear Bob Dylan sing." Well, maybe so, but you got to hand it to him. He has a way of presenting his songs that maybe not every one of them will strike you, but I guarantee you, if you sit and listen to him in concert for an hour, you're going to hear several things that are going to knock you out, and because he will grab you with that presentation. So you got to work within your limits too. I mean, I'm not saying I'm any better than Bob Dylan or anybody else. I just, you take what you got and try to squeeze the most out of it.
Yeah. Work within your strengths and whatever your constraints are, right? I think that's interesting too. I wonder if there's parallels there between that and what you did when you were writing for the publishing company, where there's like restrictions, kind of, right? You got to be there at a certain time and you got to do things in a certain way. Sometimes that restriction can actually be really freeing. Yeah.
There was a lot of what am I trying to say? There was a lot of opportunities to learn both what to do and what not to do in that experience, and I'm so glad I had it, because it was like, I don't think I'd be writing the way I am today if I had not had that experience to kind of guide me and show me what it is that I love.
Yeah.
Because at that time, I don't think I really knew yet.
Interesting.
I mean, I loved a lot of stuff, but I can't do all of that stuff. So I had to kind of distill it down into what I can do and make that work the best I could. So anyway.
Were you learning that from just trial and error from other people?
Well,
or both?
Again, both.
Yeah.
Because, man, I was lucky. I was writing with some of the best. Well, all those folks you saw on the Barnegie Hall show.
Yeah.
I was writing with them. We all grew up together.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was a heck of a class.
It's an amazing group of people. Yeah.
I think in those 13 shows, we had something like 45 number ones. We had there's several Grammys.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of songwriter. Hall of Fame songwriters. I mean, it's a pretty impressive list. And the beautiful part of it is that those are my friends.
Those are your friends, yeah.
I just called them up one afternoon, and I got those 13 people to come.
That's amazing,
and sit around and pick with me, and made a show out of it.
That's
so,
amazing.
Yeah.
Do you get together with those folks now? Do you sit and write with them or have creative sessions?
You know, very rarely, because we're all pretty much out there in the world doing it.
Yeah.
And when we come home, that's our off time.
Yeah.
You know, I come home, I've got to do stuff like clean the gutters and, you know, take out the trash. And, I mean, I wish we could, but occasionally there'll be a good jam session breakout, and you'll get a call and, hey, you need to get over here. So and so just showed up, and
yeah. There had to be a lot of those kinds of moments in the touring with Guy days too. A lot of those sort of like, that's what I'm picturing at least.
It was. Guy loved that kind of stuff. That's one of the things he loved the most about it, was sitting around swapping songs and licks and stories. And so there were some wild times around his kitchen table, dining room table.
It was kind of like he sort of, as I understand it, that space was kind of like encouraged for people to stop by, right, and talk shop and write and stuff like that.
Yeah, he Guy would almost challenge you to, you know, what, you got anything new? You know? Well, man, when you gonna play me a new song? I mean, it was like that. He wouldn't let you slack off.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it was kind of scary for me, especially in the beginning, because Guy wouldn't like throw out the compliments that easily. I mean, he'd nod or something, but if you did nail one, man, he would, you know, he would want you to play it everywhere you went.
Wow.
Play 'em at Joe Walker's Mary, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, gosh, he was just. I always said it was kind of like getting to paint with Picasso every day.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Did you have sessions where did you have like a lot of I know you guys wrote together. Was it a frequent thing where you would set aside time to do it, or was it more spontaneous?
In the earlier days, the first, you know, 10 years, 15 years, we would, you know, we'd set up an appointment, put it in the books, and sit down and go to work. And then it kind of, we were spending so much time together, you know. We traveled so many days a year, and it got to that point where we when we came home off the road, we didn't want to see each other for a week.
That makes a lot of sense. I wondered about that with your
Yeah.
relationship, because it's like you guys were really close friends, but he's also seems to be a bit of a mentor to you in some ways,
Definitely.
right?
Absolutely, a mentor in the first degree.
Yeah.
But as things as the years went along, it just got to be more of a, guy started, his health started failing, and I found myself becoming a bit more of a caretaker. And that started to feel awkward, and it was for him too, because he needed my help, just doing physical, simple things,
Right.
And that's kind of the main reason. I just kind of needed a break from him when the road trip was over. I needed to kind of regroup and clear my head and my thoughts and everything in order to be able to come back and do it again with conviction.
Yeah, that's really hard, especially with someone who's larger than life like Guy. It's like the adage about the sort of when your father, for example, like my dad, recently, just as I'm seeing him get older and some of the things he can't do, he used to come here with me every time, and he'd camp with me, and now he can't really do it. He just doesn't. He physically isn't capable of it, and it really wears on me. Just seeing him in that way, because he was Superman. When I was growing up, and so, like taking care of somebody like Guy, who you were running with for 20 some years, right? You guys were on the road like 20 plus years,
25 or something like that.
Do you have that caretaker kind of bent to you?
Oh yeah,
really.
And that's part of the problem. If I could just leave things alone and let things be, but Guy, as he was getting weaker and in more pain, and he would get grumpier, and especially one of the most dreaded things was our sound checks, because Guy would chew up the sound men and spit them out. And then I would secretly go back around behind the building and find the sound guy and go, oh man, don't take that personally. Guy's just in pain, he's not feeling good. And so I was constantly trying
That's exhausting, Verlon.
Yeah, it was. So that's why I had to have a break when we got home,
Yeah, to recharge.
But here's the thing: he was giving me so much, and gave me so much, so many opportunities, taught me so much, that I was just trying to earn my keep and pay him back just a little bit of what he'd given me. So it's all good. In the end, it's all just exactly right.
That's awesome, man. What a great attitude to have about that. I mean, it sounds like it just sounds like so much. But I guess when you love somebody that much, you do whatever, and you've received so much from them. I guess it is natural to give back in whatever way you can. I just wonder, like, what kind of toll that takes on you. Like, what do you do then, and what do you do even now for self-care? Like, how do you?
Well, I tell you, I should do more. Well, we were talking about yoga earlier.
Yep.
I should do more physical and just more bodily care. I think I've slacked. I used to run, and I used to ride bikes, and I did all this stuff, and man, I've just gotten so busy. I've let all that go, and I can tell it's my breathing is not as good, and my playing is not as sharp, and but on the mental side of everything, man, it's better than it's ever been.
Awesome.
The music just carries me. I mean, it cleanses me. No matter what's going on, when I take the stage or when I get in front of a group of folks,
Yeah.
the music just carries me. It's like riding on a wave or a breeze, and then I just feel, I feel recharged, and I feel perfect until the next time I get up there, and I just look forward to the next time because I know how good I'm going to feel.
That's beautiful.
Now, if I could just get my butt in gear and do some exercise, I think I could go a long time doing this.
Well, I think that's the key, right? Is that like I finally have identified, I'm not about to hit you with any major wisdom here, okay? This is like no shit, dude. Why didn't you recognize this before? Kind of wisdom. But if I exercise in some capacity every day, right? It doesn't have to be. I'm training for a marathon right now, so the runs are pretty intense.
Yeah.
But if it's an off day like today, I'm gonna walk probably 10 miles today.
Oh, out here in the park.
The park. If I exercise, if I write every day, and that doesn't mean I'm writing a song. It doesn't mean I'm writing a story. It just means if I'm putting words down and doing the work, and if I read a little something every day, then everything else is better. Right? I'm funnier. I'm nicer. I'm more relaxed. And it's not a magic formula.
No, it's not.
It's real easy, actually.
It is.
But if I don't do those things, excuse me. If I don't do those things, then I'll see it show up in other parts of my life. And so if you're doing the exercise, then your guitar playing, like you said, is sharper. I loved how you put it that way. Like, yes, of course it is.
Your senses are just keener.
Yeah.
Everything is just clearer and smoother and better, and so that's my vow to you, brother. I'm gonna start getting on top of that because it's funny. I keep talking about Guy, but I look back and I remember exactly when he hit this point. I'm at this point where I remember him hitting this because Guy used to be, man, he could like drink whiskey all night.
Yeah.
He could jump up and we'd go play golf the next morning. Then we'd play a show and he was still. And then one day I noticed he was just kind of, his breathing wasn't as precise when he sang, and he was missing a lick here and there, and I'm there. I saw it this morning. I felt it this morning. So if I don't do something, it's my own fault. I have been given the signs, and I recognize them. I'm aware of them, so here we go.
Well, I'm going to check in on you, and we've got this now immortalized on...
It's on tape.
It's on tape. So everybody out there, Verlon doesn't have much of a social media presence, but he is on Facebook.
I am.
You can hound him on Facebook and make sure he's...
That's all I need.
I want to see some yoga photos, damn it. I want to see you posting yoga photos on Facebook.
I'm still trying to come to grips with yoga, but,
I think you got to give it a shot, man. I'm telling you, it changed my life.
Well, I've heard so many people say that.
Yeah.
So,
and you got an instructor, we just ran into her.
Yeah.
So.
She's like, she brought a mat.
Yeah.
All I got to do is just get down in that dog position and go.
Various dog positions. You can do that, man. I don't think you'll have any problem getting into a dog position.
We'll see. I don't know.
Well,
I stay in a dog position.
Stay in the dog house, maybe.
Yeah.
Man, Verlon, again, such an honor. Thank you. This was so much fun once again.
My pleasure, man. I always have a good time talking with you. Anytime you want to talk to me,
awesome.
I'll make it happen.
Man, thank you so much. All right, brother.
Thanks.
I was passing by a pawn shop over in the older part of town when something caught my eye, and I stopped and turned around, and I went inside, and there I spied in the middle of it all this beat up
Verlon
old
Thompson,
guitar.
y'all, what an honor. Thank you so much, Verlon. Thank you to everybody at Spirit of the Suwannee Music Park and Suwannee Roots Revival for having me every year. I'm so grateful for these opportunities. We have one more in this Suwannee series, and that's going to be with Seth Walker returning. And then after that, I just sat down yesterday with Caleb Cottle. I'm recording this on a Monday, and I sat down with Caleb here at Marinade Studios after getting a chance to see him play the Folk Yeah Festival, which I was honored to be a part of as well. And that conversation was deep and thoughtful, and I'm so excited for y'all to hear my conversation with Seth and then also my conversation with Caleb. Give us a follow on your podcast app, please, and a rating. Hit that subscribe button. Follow us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We're especially active on Twitter and to some extent on Instagram. But, if you send us a message or give us a mention, I'll get to it on any of those platforms. And we love interacting in that way. Like I really appreciate every little thing. Anytime you can share a link that I send out, or anytime you can click like on anything that I post about the show, it makes a huge difference, and I'm just so grateful for all of you for interacting with us in that way. Tell a friend about the show. If you really like what we're doing, maybe go that extra mile and join our Patreon community, where you can get exclusive content like our Patreon-only show, Jason's Journey, where I talk about the moments that have shaped my creative life for just a few bucks a month. And if that's not something that you're prepared to do, or you can't swing at the moment, just all those other free things make a huge difference, and we greatly appreciate them. All right, y'all, it's time for What I'm Getting Down on, the segment where I talk about the art that is inspiring me at the moment. I've been really fired up about a few things, especially TV and film. We started, I started watching The Leftovers. My partner Chris was already watching it. I was trying to sleep with our 5-month-old puppy Nonsense, but I couldn't stay asleep because of the pull from this show. It's written by Damon Lindelof, who also wrote Lost, which I have not watched, and then Watchmen, the series, which if you listen to the show, I have been just completely devouring. It's interesting because I think in the last year, and this is something that Caleb Cottle and I talked about, I've been really interested in television writing, not so much as a potential discipline for myself, but just because I'm so into the work of Brian Koppelman and Craig Mazin, and I listen to them on podcasts talk about their process, and then also consume their art, the art that they create. And I just find it so interesting, and I think there are lessons to be learned from screenwriting that can transfer over into other creative disciplines. The other night, we also watched Sunset Boulevard, the classic film noir, and it just floored both of us. Sometimes I think in 2019, I'll be guilty of watching television and checking Twitter on my phone, or checking my fantasy football team, or, stopping to play with the dog or whatever, or even leaving the room. I didn't used to do that, and I've noticed recently I do that more instead of totally consuming whatever I'm watching. And I'm glad that I didn't do that with Sunset Boulevard, and I'm hoping to make that more of a habit, get back in the habit of really watching films. David Lynch talks a lot about that. He's got a wonderful book called Catching the Big Fish, and he talks about just how important it is to consume the whole work and to stay focused on it. So that's something that we both noticed with Sunset Boulevard that we did. We just couldn't get enough of it. Lots and lots of music, y'all. I've been really fortunate to get to be sent a lot of things in recent weeks that have stirred me. But the record I keep coming back to is Joe Henry. The Gospel According to Water is just breathtaking, and I just can't get enough of it. I mean, I wasn't familiar with his work, and Jason Isbell tweeted about him and said some glowing things. And anytime Isbell talks, of course, I listen. Just totally blown away, man. I mean, just totally blown away. And then the other thing that really has me fired up is attending the Folk Yeah Festival here in Orlando. Mike Dunn puts it together. Mike's a musician and photographer who is just this dear, sweet guy. And he started this kind of labor of love a few years ago, and it keeps growing. I mean, this year, Zach Williams of the Lone Bellow Caleb Caudle, Have Gun Will Travel. There were some bigger names that played. Usually it's just kind of local, local names and people that maybe are big in this world here, but not necessarily national touring acts. And this time I had the honor, Jordan Foley asked me to host a songwriter in the round kind of situation. And it evolved from something that I thought was going to be more kind of labor intensive on my part. Like I was going to ask questions of the artists, and then we just decided to kind of let the song shine. I did ask a couple of questions, but for the most part, I just got out of their way and let people play their beautiful songs. And there was just so much talent, and that lineup was so well balanced. There were people. The showcase that I hosted is called Songwriters on the Rise, and it's a series that Jordan does every 2 weeks at a local venue here, where he brings in a songwriter that is kind of on the rise, so to speak, and they kind of play in the round. He and the songwriter do, and this was amazing. This was like every song was just leveling the room, and it was cool because a lot of people that attended were songwriters themselves, and so there was I think that led to a lot of respect for the music. In that listening room, it was just dead quiet. It was so nice. It was just, and we've talked about this on this show before, and then with my Patreon community, we talk about this. We've talked about this before. The idea of like respecting the music and listening to the music and taking it in, instead of having a conversation that might distract somebody else. This was such a reverent festival, and everybody was so focused on the craft and on the music, and it was just a beautiful feeling, And so I was so grateful to be a part of it. I didn't do much. I was just emceeing the stage, which is pretty much in my wheelhouse and pretty easy for me. But I just couldn't. I'm just so grateful to Jordan. Thank you, Jordan, and thank you to Mike and everybody over at Will's Pub and Little Indies here in town, where we record so many of our episodes for the Marinade. But it's just got me fired up, just seeing that much talent and getting to have so many conversations about creativity. It makes me want to sit down and write and do things. I'm on fire right now. I'm extremely excited about what we have going on for the Marinade, and then some of my other creative pursuits. Until next time, y'all, thank you so much for listening. Go out and create something. Cheers, y'all.